everyone, welcome back to another episode of Crossing Swords. As always, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Jake, and I'm here to bring you back to talk about the Taliban. That's right. Every podcast these days seems to start with promoting a service or a product of some kind, and we're no different. So, Big, tell them the perks.
Well, with the Taliban, you get a dictatorship, really, I guess. No equality amongst men and women, slavery, getting kicked out of your homes.
Working hours are pretty good. I think you pretty much do what you want. You should join. You know what?
Yeah.
We'll send you a brochure.
There's some money in it.
Right in crossingswords19@gmail.com. We'll use our discount. We'll hook you up.
At some point during this video, that will come up on the screen.
Yeah, and there'll be like a little flag for the... You'll get it.
Yeah, it might be a Taliban flag, might be UK, we don't know.
Too political.
Yeah,
but we will go there.
But no, I think before we go in, I think I'd just like to have a quick thank you in a moment to bash ourselves a little bit, I suppose. Or
it's
pick
that time
ourselves up
already?
A little bit. Yeah, I would say so.
Oh, no, when you said bash ourselves, I went somewhere else.
But yeah, I just want to say thank you to all of our listeners, because we've been gone quite a while now. And even while we've been gone, the downloads have been quite steady. The interest has still been there, and it really kept us, or I know it kept me definitely motivated to want to come back and
we're very,
get
very
started
grateful.
Again.
Very grateful.
And it gave us a kick up the arse in terms of we bought some new gear, we've invested in the pod a little bit more. And so, yeah, hopefully it'll be positive.
Yeah, I mean, we oiled ourselves up and everything. We were looking in the mirrors, really getting ourselves ready. We were like, we got to look good, because we're going to go on YouTube, and you'll see this on YouTube. So head over to check out our new dynamic, our new position. Anyone from the old school pod, by the way, will notice that we've switched positions.
We were never at this angle before.
We like new positions.
The world is our oyster. It's right behind me.
Yeah, you got like Brazil. So you've
got
like
some of the world.
You got some of the world. I mean, I was about to say it's a bit of a shit part, but then that'd be really fucking off Brazil really early doors.
Do you know what, Stars? We need to go
new series. South America's got.
Do you know what? We've actually got some listeners in Brazil. I'm not even at least one.
Have we? Do you know what? I mean, I like Brazil. I'm not just saying that because you're here and you're listening. I do like Brazil. I think it's a cool place. Some of it.
Is that Copacabana Beach?
Copacabana. No, I wouldn't do Barry Manilow.
Is that not in Brazil?
I just don't feel like it fits with our new Taliban sponsorship.
I don't know. Barry Manilow could be into a bit of the Taliban, I reckon.
I would love that. I would love if the Taliban put on concerts and Barry Manilow was on. Can you imagine them all like in the pickup trucks with the guns?
See, what they'd end up with, though, in reality, they'd end up with that guy from EastEnders that we had singing opera songs.
Oh, Barry from EastEnders doing the Bowls Championship. Oh, if you've not seen this clip, by the way, go and watch this clip. He opens the Bowls Championship by singing Something Inside So Strong, and the audience could not give less of a shit.
They were so unimpressed. To be honest, though, I think he was unimpressed that he was there.
He belted it out, though.
He gave it a go. He committed.
But we are back to talk about something serious.
So like, what do you think of what's been going on lately?
Well, if I may, it's the Crossing Swords tradition to do a bit of facts and figures. I haven't just looked up like Wikipedia how many fucking people are in Afghanistan, because that figure would be wrong anyway, wouldn't it now?
Well, no one
to be fair, that's changing.
I'd imagine so.
But by the time we start this pod to the time we end, that'll be different. Yeah. So that was a waste of time. Afghanistan, capital Kabul.
Yep.
Nailed that. Facts and figures in the bag,
Spot
I think.
On,
in terms of that's pretty much covered.
Lay some more on them, Jake.
But look, as anyone who listens to the pod knows, that Big usually does the research.
Guys, I just want to take a moment here just to congratulate Jake for having some facts and figures in front of him. This may or may not work.
I mean, I fucked up Brazil
and
you've laughed about Afghanistan. Can I just say what you wanted to do? Right. No, listen.
That didn't work.
So Big usually does the facts and figures, right? I've actually got some facts and figures. I've got some research. Today. Oh, that made me laugh so much. So there are 2 official languages in Afghanistan, and that becomes relevant to what I'm going to say in a little bit. So they are Pashto and Dari, and what they are both dialects of Persian, basically, of Farsi.
Okay,
so
fair enough.
And the reason that's relevant is because in Pashto, Taliban means student.
Okay.
So I'll give you a quick history of the Taliban, because
I know nothing about them.
I'm not prepared. I come, you're like, what am I going to learn today?
Well, and also we like to educate the children that are watching, and the adults, and anyone really.
Can we educate
and
children?
Ourselves.
Or is that grooming? if we educate children.
I think we can educate children.
Given that we started the episode by telling them they should join the Taliban, I think it might be considered grooming.
Yeah, but we don't actually read that.
No, I think we've got to agree that if you're going to join the Taliban, 18 plus.
Also, joining terrorist groups, don't do it lightly.
Yeah.
If there's anything you're going to take away from this, don't do that poor girl. Was it Begum? I can't remember.
Oh, Shamama Begum.
That's what that lady.
And what I'd say is, I think 18 and over, join a terrorist group, that's fine. Under 18, sweatshops. If you really want to get involved in some, if you really want to produce to the seedy side of the world, sweatshops. Fair? No, I'm not going to ask that.
No, I'm not going to answer that either.
Should I do some serious stuff?
Yeah, do some serious stuff.
Okay, so the Taliban was formed by the Mujahideen fighters who fought Soviet forces in the late 70s and early 80s when the USSR was basically trying to take over Afghanistan. They were trying to get in and be like, right, you guys are fucking communists now. Kind of like they did with a lot of the world. Well, a lot of the world near them anyway.
Yeah.
And what happened was that in the Kandahar region, there were these Mujahideen fighters fighting back and fighting against the Soviets. And to counter terrorism, to counter the Soviet press and the press for communism, the CIA funded these group of students, the Taliban.
Okay, so they've actually been created
so their
by the
basis
Americans.
Is entirely in the American involvement in the Middle East. And
look, that's not without precedent. They've done it all over the planet. They did it in Cuba, in the Bay of Pigs. They paid rebel fighters and trained them and sent them over there.
They have created their own enemies time and time again.
Yeah.
Shout out to the Americans. We love you guys. The thing is,
and the thing is, that makes me laugh even more because when I genuinely, when I don't know a lot about something, I will literally write what is going on in this country. So I did it with Afghanistan. And I found out the reason the Americans went to war in Afghanistan in the first place was to get rid of the Taliban. To find out that they actually created them, it's quite ridiculous.
Yeah, so anyway, in 1996, they officially took over in Afghanistan as the main power.
Yeah.
And that only lasted till 2001. I should say that while they were in power, only 4 countries that I could find in my research, only 4 countries recognised them as the official power in Afghanistan.
Okay.
Let's see what you make of these. Pakistan, huge. There's quite a big Taliban presence. Obviously, Malala, the girl who came over here and studied at Oxford, who got shot in the head by the Taliban for learning. Basically, that was in Pakistan. So there's already a kind of a bit of a link.
Okay.
Turkmenistan, not even a real country. Do you know what I'm saying, bro?
I wouldn't be able to tell you where that is.
Like, sort your shit out. I mean, we've got a world map on here, and even I don't give enough of a shit to look up.
Where is it? Did you look that up?
Well, I mean, it's going to be around, the Iraq, Iran, that area, isn't it?
Okay, fair enough. Who's next?
Literally just pause to have a look. Yeah, Turkmenistan, there you go, sort of above Iran, northeast.
Okay, yeah, I see it. It's literally next door to Afghanistan.
And I say now,
Pakistan.
We really like Brazil. Turkmenistan, sort yourselves out, mate. And these are the other two, the UAE and Saudi Arabia.
Okay, fair enough.
Obviously, so they recognise now. The reason that they were ousted in 2001, as we know, is by the US went over there to oust them, quite simply because they were hiding terrorist groups, including Al Qaeda.
Yeah, it was their links to terrorism.
It was absolutely what it was. So Al Qaeda and a number of other similar groups were hiding out in the mountainous regions around Afghanistan, not only with the Taliban's awareness, is that even the right way to phrase that? But they not only knew about it, they sort of supported it. They were absolutely fine and cool with it. Peace talks began with the US in UAE predominantly back in 2018. Main man Don, big shout out, Big Don, big words, Don. Big Don, big words. You know
Big
the guy.
Don or Big Don?
Big Don, little hands.
Don?
You know the guy.
As in Donald?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big Don, big hands, big words, big everything. So I hear big wallet.
That's not what I've heard.
No,
he
definitely hasn't got a big wallet.
Like, quite frankly, if you're in less than $600 million worth of debt, you're richer than Donald Trump.
Yeah, I don't know. I've got student debt.
They are extortionate.
But yeah, so listen, so they started in 2018, mainly included things about the rights for women in the post, in the new Taliban era, where they're like, okay, we'll let you guys be cool.
But these are the things we want.
Yeah. So they since their takeover, that thing for women's equality seems to have been relatively abandoned.
Yeah.
So a lot of the big jobs, women were turning up, they were like, yeah, women can come to work, that's fine, and they were turning up and they were being told, no, go home. This isn't your place here. I'm not going to pass judgment. This is just the reports that we're getting.
Yeah.
They haven't actually attacked US or UK troops since that peace talks began. They have been killing Afghan troops and anyone associated with the government, though.
Yeah.
And also, as you know, anyone who did any kind of work for the UK and the US during that 2001 to 2018 period are also being killed and targeted.
Okay.
So interpreters, people like that. And interpreters, it's literally, you're like, I've got a job, I need a job, what can I do? Oh, I happen to speak English. Well, I'll just, I'll get a job, and then suddenly being hunted.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. So far, as of the point of recording, the UK has helped 6,600 people out of Afghanistan since August 14th. But that's not necessarily to say 6,600 Brits or Afghanistanis. That's of many nations and nationalities, yeah. And many have been waiting hours without food or even water at the airport in a queue to see if they'll be able to leave.
I mean, we've seen the images of people surrounding the planes desperate to leave.
Yeah, and I mean, many people with British passports in Kabul are being denied access to the embassy and to the airport to get out. And these are people with British passports, yeah. Just to go back into it, so opioids fund approximately 10% of the entire nation's economy in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I did hear that. Growing poppy.
Is worth it's worth a lot of money. And it estimates go anywhere from 300 million to 1.5 billion a year.
It's a lot of money.
And it's also 90% of the Taliban's income.
Okay.
So here's some of the questions that I want to ask that we'll get into. Is obviously they're talking about cutting foreign aid. Foreign aid currently stands at £6 billion to Afghanistan, which makes up 1/3 of the economy. That's a huge amount of the economy from foreign aid. And the questions being asked, and I've got more notes and we'll come back to them sort of later on other bits and pieces, is because it's a thought I had, is if we do remove funding, foreign aid, because obviously we don't want to support the Taliban. I think that's clear. I think Crossing Swords has made its position pretty clear. Not that we have any sway with the government, but
that we're pretty anti-Taliban.
But if we do remove that, what happens is they're going to need to find that gap. And the way they're going to find that gap is by flooding the world with more drugs. They're going to increase their drug trade. They're going to increase their illegal arms trade. And all these things that are currently their sort of backdoor ways of making money. And I've got to pause. Was that a deliberate move to do your jacket up around the microphone wire?
No, it wasn't. I realised I'd done it afterwards when I tried pulling it up.
It's genuinely like having a political discussion. It's genuinely like having Mr. Bean on Newsnight.
I am listening though. I've got a controversial opinion about foreign aid in general. I listened to a lady. I wish I could remember her name. She was a.
Well, you got one up on the Taliban. You listened to a lady.
She was an African economist that had grown up in really bad circumstances, and she'd come over to the UK and been educated, and she'd gone to Oxford and was this incredibly intelligent financial expert. And I listened to her, and basically her attitude was the foreign aid doesn't achieve what it's supposed to achieve. Most of the African nations, 50% of their income or their budget per year, I think for a few of them, 75% is foreign aid.
But I would then argue that surely, I realise part of the thing with foreign aid is you do try and say this is what it's for, but surely it's like that thing. It's like when a friend asks for money, it's obviously a much bigger scale thing, but it's a similar principle. When a friend asks for money, you might feel a bit cheated if they give you a reason why they want it, and then spend it on something else. But ultimately, once you give them that money, it's up to them to distribute how they want to.
Yeah, absolutely. You're 100% right. And then that's the problem with it in general, because we're giving it to a lot of governments that are inherently corrupt and are spending it on themselves and not where it's supposed to be spent. So I would far rather, if we were going to allocate that level of resources to anything, it would be to bring people from those countries to come and live here.
And on that subject, let's briefly talk about that. So the British government have committed to move in, to taking in 20,000 refugees, but that's 20,000 over 5 years or 4 years. 5,000 in the first year. So they're saying by the end of 2021. So this shit's going on right now. It's been going on about 2 weeks, a week and a half, and they're saying that we will take 5,000 people into the UK by the end of the year. And you said that's just not enough.
It's not close to enough. They reckon there's at least 1 million people trying to get out of Afghanistan at the moment.
One of the things,
and obviously some of those will be British citizens or European citizens or from other nations, but there's still going to be, I would imagine,
huge shout out by the way to the guy that Afghanistan. That I saw on the news, who's like had quote unquote extreme holidaying, likes going to dangerous situations, and found himself holidaying in Kabul when the Taliban took over.
Oh, was that young lad?
Yeah,
and he's got out though, hasn't he? He's
mental, absolutely mental. But no, but I mean, I've completely forgotten what I was going to say. But yeah, I think it's not an because one of the things that's sort of been doing the rounds is the fact that obviously Priti Patel's the Home Secretary at the moment. I mean, we'll get on to Dominic Raab. Fuck, will we get on to Dominic Raab? We can't do this without talking about him. But Priti Patel is the daughter of, and I might be getting, I mean, if I'm getting my facts wrong, please tell me. Please tell me. No, I believe she comes from her parents.
That's the way you say it.
Trying to work out the age thing. I think her parents, or possibly her grandparents, came from, Uganda when there was the whole Idi Amin thing, right?
Yep.
And we took in, and the thing is that she came from that, so that's her origins anyway. So you're talking about
taking she's people against bringing people in.
But we took, and the figures vary, but the lowest figure you can find is that we took 27,000 people from that crisis, from that humanitarian crisis into the UK. Yeah. We're now talking about taking 20 from this crisis, from someone who literally their whole life came from that. And I'm not saying we should be like, well, fuck her, she shouldn't be great. Like, be grateful and acknowledge that that's where, that's where you came from.
I think, to be honest, what we need to start recognising is that, to be honest, it doesn't really matter what sort of background or nationality or creed someone from certain parties come from. I think once they get to a certain level, so if you're Priti Patel, it doesn't matter that your family are former refugees. She's just in the position she's in, and she has to toe the party line. She's not going to put her neck on the line for refugees.
I know, and
and that's not a defence.
It reeks of you just want to slap someone in the face if they can't see it, and they can see it. Obviously, she knows.
Well, yeah,
she's not dumb.
There's no way it escapes her what's going on over there and what it means.
The similarities,
in terms of her
the parallels.
Connection to it. And I think it's probably, I'd imagine she probably does care about it, but she just has to be ignorant to it.
Yeah, and I've got to just, if you could just pad for 2 seconds while I just look up.
Oh, I do love a good padding. So guys, how have you been? It's been a while. I'm still not used to these sound effects, as you saw from my mistake earlier. Not quite with it today, hence why I tried zipping up my jacket over my microphone cable.
I mean, what really? I know. I did know the name. I just had to check. So, if we segue from Priti Patel along, we have to make this stop to Laurie Bristow, who is the ambassador in Afghanistan for the UK.
Yeah.
And so when everything was going shit quick and everyone was running to get out, he's literally stationed himself at the airport and has been signing visas and helping his team, and he will not leave until this is what he said anyway, but his actions seem to back it up, that he will not leave until he absolutely has to, the last second where the troops are coming out and he will no longer be safe.
Yeah.
And I just got to give a huge shout out, because I think that's the job, right?
I mean, a lot of people would go, "Oh yeah, he's just doing his job," and he's going above and beyond.
Find out in a humanitarian crisis, you up your game, and if you want to talk about just doing your job, like I said, let's segue along into Dominic Raab.
Well, what can we say about Dominic Raab?
Yeah, I mean, what can we say that we haven't already said on this pod before?
I mean, I sat earlier when I was thinking about the things I'd like to talk about today on the pod. I tried to think of some sort of positive way I could spin the fact he was on holiday rather than fulfilling his duties and dealing with a international crisis. And the only positive I could really come up with was the fact that I don't think it makes a blind bit of difference whether he was on duty or not. It's just the appearance that's the problem.
He's useless as well. There is that to consider. But it made me think, and I couldn't help it, every time I've seen the story or seen someone mention it, it made me think of, I don't know what the episode is, but you know in The Simpsons, where there's like a crisis back in Springfield, and Mayor Quimby's on the beach, and he's like got a fake office set up on the beach, and he's in like his shorts, but he's only being shot from the waist up, and he's like, I cannot stand out here in this time. And then the guy comes through with the steel drums. He's like, get those steel drums out of the mayor's office. And they pull back, and he's got like shorts, and he's just still on the beach. And it just, every time it made me think of it.
That's fair enough. I haven't seen that particular episode, I have to say.
And apparently Boris told him it was all right. And the thing is, everyone can see this was coming, right?
What, the Afghan crisis? Or
the Taliban takeover? Not long term, but for about a week.
Well, yeah, once it started happening, it was like inevitable. Yeah.
This is happening.
Sorry,
quick.
I thought you meant like a few months ago. Did I know that the Taliban
I'm not.
were planning to take over Afghanistan?
We're not the BBC. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, so you're my Middle East correspondent. Surely you knew the signs.
I do know a lot about Bin Laden, more than I should probably.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, Bin Laden is sort of intrinsically linked to this, because of his.
I think the problem is we're not going to take lead on any of it because, one, we're not capable of doing so. We don't have the resources. We don't have the military to do it anymore.
The military is driving King HGVs, trying to get food shortages sorted out in Brexit.
Yeah, and we don't have the inclination to do it. Morally, we should be taking in everyone we physically can from this crisis. We've spent the last 20 years being an active part of bombing Afghanistan on a regular basis, tormenting their people, and then when it comes time to help them, we just go, no, it doesn't suit us anymore. And to be honest, the only reason we went into it before anyway was because the UN dragged us into it to help America.
Well, and here's the. Well, I mean, I keep saying here's the thing. There's lots of things to it, and it's an incredibly complicated situation. We personally have a history of starting problems in the Middle East and then fucking off and leaving them. That goes back a very, very long way.
It does. Not just the Middle East.
Can I just take this moment to say and bang on about this point that, at no point should you consider any weight to the privilege of where you were born. Because that is none of your control. You had nothing to do with that.
No.
Nothing to do with it at all. So don't be standing there saying, well, I'm okay, I got in, and if they come in, it's going to... These people are scared for their future, they're scared for their lives. And in any of them, in any of the Middle Eastern countries or any of the other countries, and I mean, it's a case of you don't control where you're born.
No, and also I think just on a pragmatic level, and it's something people never really want to be honest about for some reason. Well, I know what reason, because it helps with things like Brexit. But immigration, refugees, on the whole, not on every case, but in general, they're a net positive on our society. They come here wanting to work, wanting to have a productive and healthy family life. They've come from less. So they've come to a country with more to get more, not just to be handed it. They work hard. In my experience, in my working life, most people from other nations are far harder working than people that have been born in this great nation, in my experience. Not en masse, it's probably slightly unfair.
Marginal.
I've worked with more people that haven't been from the UK than have been, so your scale's been skewed. But yeah, so I think and that's something we don't really discuss. So for me, if we took in the whole lot of the Afghan refugees, I'm not saying we should, but if we did, I personally don't see that as a negative.
No, and I saw a couple of graphs from reputable places. By the way, I'm not one of those that just rabbit holes into some really left wing shit, because we all know I'm quite left wing. But I saw some graphs from reputable places, and the percentage of global refugees that we've taken in the last 5 years is something like 0.0002%.
What of the overall
of the total, in terms of you take every single refugee that's been displaced and moved in the last 5 years, we have taken in a grand total of 0.02, which, given our sort of our Bertie big bollocks view of how we stand in the world and our place in the world,
so inaccurate now.
It's tiny. Well, like we're this big economic powerhouse, right? We're the fucking big boys, and we've got all this. We can support ourselves through Brexit and everything, and it's like, well,
but as soon as it comes to
you can afford
others,
to take on, and it's that old thing as well of a lot of people, the government included, who will say, well, we've got problems here, but they're not willing to look at the problems here. The problems here are only problems here when there's problems over there that we need to be dealing with. No,
that's the thing. People use, we've got a homeless problem here. Shouldn't we solve that before we go helping other countries? Can't we do both?
That is an excellent opportunity.
Can't we do both? And people go, well, there's no money for it. Yes, there is. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, there absolutely
I refuse to believe in a world where we can pluck money out of a tree to pay for whatever we want as a government decides they want to do it.
And I'm not,
Where did the money come to pay for the coronavirus outbreak?
I'm not going to go and get into the whole... also, the entire operation in Afghanistan, by the way, just as a nice little scale. So our involvement... So we were in Afghanistan, 17 years, give or take?
Yeah, just under 20.
Cost less than the test and trace. Just want to throw it out, like, genuinely.
I mean, to play devil's advocate, I could probably argue that that's down to the fact that our military size in comparison to, but no, it's ridiculous.
So, but just to kind of bring your point back to say, is there the money? Well,
we find it when it suits us.
When we want to do some shitty app that don't work, we're fine, but. And we can find it to go and spend 17 years fighting a war in another country.
Work effectively.
But no, and it doesn't. And like I said, it's huge.
And quite frankly, it's become, by the government's own regulations, more or less irrelevant now. I don't have to check in anywhere I go now. There was a period of maybe a month when I started going out again where I was having to check into the odd place, but in general...
No, it's been a huge waste of money. We can all agree on that. But yeah, sorry, it was just to put it into some kind of context that actually...
Yeah, no, but the thing is, we're happy to spend money when it seems of use to us, or if it's... But when people... The problem is, it always comes back to with these sort of things that people think by giving someone else more, they end up with less, and that's just not how it works at all.
No, but it sort of is... But you've got to realise that
you're right in the sense that the government will then make cuts elsewhere. Well, no, I was going to say,
the us and them is not what you think it is. The us and them is...
They're those refugees are in the same...
Multi-millionaires and billionaires.
Yeah.
And us. And yes, when they make more, we make less.
Yeah.
And, over the past year, that's been more evident than ever.
I don't know if I'm necessarily all down with capitalism. I don't want to go too off-key. I know we're talking about Afghanistan.
But sort of relevant, though, because it was formed by an anti-communist movement. I'm not against there being
Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates. I don't mind people being obscenely wealthy. Because 9 times out of 10, just by dint of fact of wanting to hold on to their money, they end up donating a shitload in the process. But I don't mind that. But just pay your staff a little bit more. Do you know what I mean?
It's a start.
Like,
I still think, there's enough money in the world to not have a lot of the problems that we do have. And obviously they would, by not having those problems, you create more I appreciate that.
For me, for the money being made by a lot of the big companies, particularly for a company like Amazon, they have enough cash flow to afford to be able to pay their staff better than they do. Same for all the big supermarkets. There is enough money there to do it. They just choose not to.
Yeah, and I think also, let's just to take it back to the Afghanistan thing as well, is that this is happening in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
So if Taliban have rolled in during the middle of a vaccination rollout, and they're going to have to now take over that.
Yeah.
But you've got to wonder whether their priorities for it are going to be the same as the previous government.
Well, you'd imagine they're not going to be. They're going to be about establishing control, getting control over the media, making sure the public are under
considering
control.
Not a lot of vaccinations are coming from within Afghanistan. They're coming from outside.
The thing is, what I don't understand about what's the plan going forward. So we spent, especially for America, because they would have invested the most. They were the ones who initiated going there in the first place. And apparently,
they're so not a war-loving nation. They're so against it.
And I don't mind them not wanting to be at war. But the stuff I've heard since, like apparently there was thousands of engineers that America had over there that were training their people that had not long come over. And when they made the decision, they were gone. And apparently the first attack from the Taliban... pretty much everyone down tools in the government, they retreated from the country. The army fled. So they pretty much, the people were just left completely defenceless. But my point is, I don't know what the plan is going forward, because they put everything that they have into it and they've just pulled out, and now the Taliban have taken over again, which defeated the whole purpose of the attack in the first place. So what's the plan? Are they going to eventually recognise the Taliban as legitimate leaders of Afghanistan, or do we just let them stay in control and not do that?
Here's the question, because also, the whole thing, part of the peace talks involved America forcing Afghanistan to release key Taliban figures who were in prison.
Okay.
So a lot of the current big figureheads and leaders of the Taliban were in prison in Afghanistan.
So they're more favourable towards America now because they've been released?
Well, I don't know if they're more favourable towards America, but it's certainly they're not going to hold any niceties towards anyone associated with the previous government.
No.
And, I'm not saying the situation was under control, but it felt like with their big leaders in prison, you feel on top of it.
Yeah.
To an extent.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, but the question is, though, I'm going to ask you straight up, and I don't expect you to have an answer. As we said earlier, you're not my Middle Eastern correspondent. I don't expect you to just know this shit. Should Biden have pulled out?
No. I think it's a simple answer. If you look at how basically ill-equipped they were, and for the Taliban to be so ready soon after pulling out, it's hard to believe that the Americans didn't know that was going to happen. I think Biden basically made a promise in his election campaign to do it, got elected, and then went, well, I've got to do it regardless of what happens.
Which is bullshit, really, because there's no politician has ever thought, do you know what, I've got to stick to an election promise. But I'm with your
But it's his complete disregard, because I sort of liked Biden in the build up to the election and all of that. And since I've seen a few interviews or him doing press briefings or whatever, and he seemed all right. But then the other day when he was talking about the Afghan issue, he was so blasé about the fact that they'd pulled out, and he was going on about, well, we've left them this and 3,000 aeroplanes and launching off all these numbers. And it was just a bit like, Have you seen the photos, mate? Clearly, like, he's and to say basically, if they're not willing to defend their own country, then why the fuck should we, basically?
Yeah, and here's the thing.
And I get that logic, but you caused the problem in the first place.
Also, let's fact check what he said, 'cause he mentioned a figure. He said they've got this many people. Actually, that figure includes literally every section of their sort of structure going down. So it includes the police. It doesn't necessarily include an army. It includes the Air Force. It includes.
Oh, so he literally just.
So he's literally just pulled the figure of like everyone on staff.
Yeah.
And also, like, they're not gonna. A lot of them are gonna be scared shitless. They're not just gonna jump up and defend it.
They're being invaded.
And essentially. But I just say this, and the whole thing of when we're gonna pull all troops out and stuff, which is obviously part of their peace talks. But one of the things is that obviously in the 50s, in the early 50s, America went to war in Korea.
Yeah.
And obviously there's the whole South Korea, North Korea divide, the demilitarized zone and all that. And ever since, America have had a very small military presence in Korea.
Yeah.
And the argument is, well, if they can have a small military presence in Korea,
why can't they have one in Afghanistan?
Why have they got to pull everyone out of Afghanistan?
Yeah.
What's the difference? Other than, like I said, it seems on face value to be a purely political, public gains move.
Well, it makes you wonder whether they actually want the Taliban in charge of Afghanistan or not.
Yeah, and let's be honest, like, I'm not just singling out the Americans, by the way. Every government does this, particularly every Western government, but every Eastern government as well. But it's not unlike them to put in people who are going to make lives miserable for all the inhabitants, because it makes their life a bit easier as a government.
Yeah, of course.
And that happens frequently.
Yeah. I think in general, to be honest, most governments want their people to be as, I suppose, disorientated as possible.
Absolutely, and it's why they've not done anything, in my opinion. No government has done anything to push down the big misinformation campaign that's come from predominantly from social media, because it works for them.
Yeah,
divide and conquer, that old age-old thing, right? It works in their favour. The less we know, the less likely we are to wake up and question them.
Well, yeah, because look, this whole thing was going on, and I knew I didn't know what the Taliban was. I didn't, and I would imagine most people don't, and that's not a dig at the general public, because I didn't either. It's not something, we're not taught about the whole situation, about anything.
No, it was sort of too political, wasn't it? You're like, we're not meant to touch it and talk about it.
Yeah, and it's, to be honest, it's like I'm not going to go into it because I know how touchy a subject it is, and I don't really understand why, because it seems pretty cut and dry to me, and that's Israel and Pakistan. That's another one that you just can't touch without being called.
You mean the Israel,
Palestine? Sorry, not Pakistan.
Well, Pakistan and Kashmir as well is obviously a thing going on.
Yeah,
in India, but yeah, the Israel-Palestine thing. Again, we know that's not the episode, but again,
no.
Britain,
That's a
Britain
very
going
big
over
subject.
Britain leaving and going, okay, well, you guys get this bit and you guys get this bit, fucking sort it amongst yourselves, and then fucking off and leaving them to kill each other.
But all I would say for anyone that
years.
Wants to know a little about it, it's very easy to look the stuff up. Like, all I found was there were some images of the size of Israel and Palestine something like 30 years ago, when it all sort of started, I guess maybe longer than 30 years ago, and then the size of them now. You'll see what the problem is. I guess it's quite evident just looking at a map.
But one of the other things, just to kind of jump off the whole misinformation thing and stuff, and let's look at the information, this has been, I mean, top news. So every news station, every podcast, hi guys, we've been talking about it, everything, it's everywhere. Is that because the Taliban's name carries such a big thing? Because people know about it? Because we've been fed it for the last 20 years? Is it because we've been there for the last 20 years and like everything you've ever heard about the military? And let's be honest, you know, we're a country like America where every country sort of does, really. The Russians as well and the Chinese, we love our military. We're like, you can't say anything against the military. It's, even if they're doing
something
bad
wrong
things, you can't say that, because you're like, well, they're doing it. And I mean, there's a great quote, there's an interview, because obviously a lot of vets have been interviewed in the last couple of weeks about, was it for nothing? Did I waste my time over there? Yeah. And one person's gone over there and said, I didn't really understand it at the time while we were there, and now I look back on it, I understand it less. And someone was really picking it up, and it's like, that's not a good thing. What that means is they just blindly followed orders, and not to compare, and obviously you want controversy? You ready for this?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, because you're not meant to compare the British, you're not meant to slag the British military off. But, that's essentially the Nazi argument right there. Well, they were just following orders. You're like, but, there's some atrocities that you kind of go, hang on a minute. What's the worst thing you have to be asked to do before you question it?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, though, I get what you're saying. But there's a very interesting conversation to be had on what we would all do if we were in Nazi Germany, because I've watched some very interesting stuff of people that started off within an hour thinking there's no way I'd have ever been a Nazi, and by the end of it saying, yeah, I can see how I would have gone along with certain things.
But my point being is, we know about this Afghanistan situation, but some other situations are happening in the world that are far less reported on. And one of the ones, obviously, I mentioned to you that I said we could potentially talk about a little bit is Belarus.
Yeah, so Belarus is basically, I mean, there wasn't as much on that. There's been an opposition politician.
It's a lot more recent Belarus. So the thing with Belarus is that basically in 1994, when the Belarus as we know it formed and took place in the aftermath of the Soviet Union, Lukashenko, who is the current president, took power and became president, and he's been president ever since. Now, anyone who knows, 1994 to 2020 is quite more than, but let's call it 15 years span. We know that anyone who's in charge of a country for 15 years, that's questionable. It's not very democratic.
No, it's unusual.
What happened was in 2020 they had an election, and the results were very much disputed. He won. Yeah,
and now there's someone they're trying to get back to the country, like an opposition.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. So the Belarus thing, and this is and I'll mention a story to you, and you'll remember it. And it's the only thing we've really heard. So the Belarus thing was like I said, there's been protests, and they've kind of introduced some really strict anti-protest and anti-government bills, and people are being tortured into giving confessions.
Yep.
And then being sentenced to 8 to 10 years kind of thing.
That's straight up Russian stuff.
One of the really interesting things is that Christina Timanovskaya, and I hope I haven't butchered that. Is a track athlete who was at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics.
Yeah.
She said she didn't really she didn't really say anything about the government so much, but she said about the Olympic Committee, and she said they're forcing me to run races that I don't want to run, that I don't feel comfortable running. And she kind of spoke out a little bit against Belarus, and it wasn't massive.
No.
But what happened was they then turned up at her room and said, "You're going home." And she got really scared. And in speaking to her, she actually alerted the police, and the Tokyo police helped get her. And Poland have now taken her in.
Okay.
And her grandmother, I think it is, she's been speaking to her and saying, "You can't come back." She says they want your blood, man.
Yeah.
And interesting. So there was another guy who was a prominent opposition figurehead. He was found hanged in a park in Ukraine.
That's mad.
And it was very much, suspicious circumstances around his death. That's happened.
We don't know, but we do.
But the story that you'll remember was Roman Protasevich. Again.
Was this the guy that was poisoned?
No. This is the guy who was on a flight to the UK earlier this year, and and Belarus phoned in, and phoned in like a fake threat. There's like a threat to the plane. You need to land, and they detoured all the way to Minsk, and this guy was visibly shaken once they announced it, and they came on and they dragged him off, and he's been seen like a couple of times since on state TV where he's been forced to give an apology and a confession, and again it's like, okay, well that's clearly bullshit.
What's happening.
But yes, all this shit's going on. There's a lot, protesters are horribly beaten and killed in some circumstances, and yet I imagine, there'll be some of you sitting there really smugly.
We'll have absolutely no idea.
Well, there'll be some of you sitting really smugly going, yeah, well, I know all about it, actually. I'm pretty well read. Because you guys are as cultured as we are.
I've got my finger on the pulse.
Yeah, I'm all about that world news.
Yeah.
But there'll be a lot of people that don't. There'll be a lot of listeners who just don't know really what's going on. Maybe they've had rumblings.
Yeah, well, to be honest, like, if you don't actually watch the news, a lot of the stuff you just genuinely won't hear about at all.
No. But I think Afghanistan and the Taliban, we've all heard. You can't not, right?
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, answering something you were sort of saying earlier was, I think that is down to how long we've been involved with it, how well known the Taliban are. I mean, you hear the word Taliban, you think, what's his face? The one that got shot. I said him earlier. His name?
Bin Laden.
That's the one.
Oh, it's like
that and Al Qaeda, but
well, yeah, my mind first went to Tony Blair. I was like, I don't remember him getting shot.
No, I'm not going to say anything. I don't want.
Maybe it's only another.
I don't want people knocking at my door for making a threat on Tony Blair's life.
No, probably best not. Although, especially when you've opened the pod, like promoting the Taliban, it's in really shady shit.
Yeah, I was just going to do something, then I decided not to. It could be done for racism, so I decided not to.
Probably for the best.
Yeah.
Probably for the best. No. You say
I don't want to get us cancelled on the first pod back.
I think we're cancel-proof.
Maybe.
Those sounds like famous last words, don't they?
Maybe.
That's going to be in an article one day. I think we're cancel-proof was a quote from Jake in their last episode before being cancelled.
Before they put on Nazi uniforms and marched around the Anne Frank Museum.
And if that wasn't bad enough, you should have heard the Afghanistan accents.
Which we won't be doing now as an example.
Yeah, I mean, like, we'll edit them out. It's fine.
Yeah.
We'll get rid of them. No, but, it's why don't we know about Belarus?
Well, I suppose we've got no vested interest in it. There's nothing Belarus has to offer us.
And I think that's, you've hit the nail on the head. It's what's in it for us.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, a fucking humanitarian crisis. Fellow humans are struggling.
Yeah. But the thing is, we only engage with any of it if there's something to be gained for us. And so clearly Belarus has nothing to offer us, so we've paid zero attention to it and we don't care what happens.
Yeah. And it's not the only country where that's happening. I mean, you've got Taipei, which is essentially on the verge of being invaded by China right now. And they've been talking for a lot. Obviously, the Hong Kong situation, where they've been introducing bills to, much like our own government are introducing anti-protest bills, they've introduced anti-protest bills. People are being given long prison sentences for protesting against the Chinese regime and any kind of push. And Hong Kong is meant to be this kind of autonomous region, but it's not.
No.
China are blatantly in charge, and they're taking people out with no care, and they're really imposing their own rules. And they're doing it. They want to do it with Taipei. Again, the Chinese Taipei is meant to be this kind of autonomous region, and it's not. China have literally said
as Tibet as well.
They want to invade it. They want to take it by force.
So like China took Tibet by force.
Yeah.
It just decided one day,
that's ours.
They basically, what they've cited is because there's some previous Chinese lords that have held the land hundreds of years ago, that they have a right to claim the land now. So currently, I didn't actually realise that Tibet's political and spiritual leader is the Dalai Lama.
Big shout out, I hear he's a listener.
So he's both. So I didn't know that. And and the government of Tibet lives in India.
Yeah, I mean, like...
and China, and even to this day, no country has recognised China as the legitimate rulers of Tibet, but they still have it.
But it's why are we not hearing about these things?
Well, to be honest with you, first of all, because China's a global powerhouse, and quite frankly, there's fuck all Britain can do about it. If we're being really honest.
Sorry, you mean Great Britain, the global powerhouse?
Yeah, we're like a tiny island. Like, to be honest with you, how much longer are we going to be Great Britain at this rate?
Oh, God, no. But again, that's another pod.
With the rumblings going on of Scottish independence and then
Irish unification.
Irish unification, which I never thought I'd hear in my lifetime.
And then the Welsh just sort of standing around like the guy who goes to the toilet, comes out and finds all their friends have gone home.
There's fuck all Wales can do. They're stuck with us.
No. And then they're just sort of clinging on, and they're literally, I've got this analogy in my head.
The last girl.
They've gone to this, there's a little group of them. It's all right. Like everyone's a bit of a laugh. England's a bit of a fucking tool, but you let them come along
because they got the Irish are good crack.
You let them come along because their dad's a big deal and it used to be a big thing. So you kind of let them hang out and you're all good fun. He goes to the toilet, he comes out, and it's just him in England. And he doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know his way home.
No.
And he's just left with England going around talking shit to anyone that will listen.
Just looking at
sheep.
Yeah.
And just England's off, just genuinely
spending time with sheep. England's doing the most self-destructive shit you've ever seen. Do you know what I mean? Snorting coke and putting fireworks up his arse. Keep electing Boris. I'm just predicting Boris for PM. Clearly, it's going to happen.
If the Taliban don't come over here, he's second best, isn't he?
Well, we're starting it, aren't we? I thought we started the
British
Wellington chapter.
Could you imagine?
We're going to go around wearing leather jackets with...
I mean, what happens if we get extremists following us around?
That'd be interesting.
Interesting is one word for it. It'd make a great autobiography if I lived long enough to write it. What happens if you get peer pressured into putting on a suicide jacket and...
Well, no, we're the leaders of our chapter, Jake. We're not. The thing is, we're going to secretly...
Yeah, you're the leaders. Lead, for example.
We're going to secretly de-radicalise them, adjust them back into normal society. And then they're going to be like, well, how does me marrying Kirsty from the pub down the road make me bring down the West? It's like, you're taking their women, mate. Like, I'm in.
Genius.
Yeah.
Although you can do better than Kirsty, poor bloke, I think. Well, maybe not.
I don't know. Are there no attractive Kirstys on the planet? Are you just shitting on Kirstys in general, or?
No, I think there's some very attractive Kirstys.
Or have you never met an attractive Kirsty?
We've mugged off enough people for this pod. But I think it's a crossing sort of tradition to mug off some people. Yeah. We don't want to do everyone.
No, I feel like you're just on a mission in this podcast. It's like, who can I pick? Afghanistanis? I know that's not what they're called. What do you call them, Jake? You've allowed me to kick Afghans. You've allowed me to call them Afghanistanis repeatedly throughout this entire podcast, and I do genuinely apologise.
I'll tell you why. Because at no point did you ask me.
I did. Several times I went, how do you say it, Jake? Because I'm just saying Afghanistanis.
I didn't stop to think about it, and I never knew. And
you never engaged with the fact I was calling them Afghanistanis. There was no reaction to your face. Yeah. You just seemed all right with it.
Why are Afghan dogs called Afghans?
What?
You're the Afghan breed of dog?
Yeah.
Like really long hair?
No.
Is that not an Afghan?
Isn't an Afghan a hat?
I'm sure there's an Afghan hat. There's like an Afghan dog.
Is there?
Yeah. I was wondering why they're called Afghan. Like, is it because they come from Afghanistan?
Entertainment on this podcast.
If they come from Afghanistan, or are we really offensive and they were saying they look like Afghans?
What look like Afghans?
The hats.
What, they look like dogs? Or they
the dogs.
The dogs look like hats, or the hats look like dogs?
No, I feel like if you've taken a pill right now, this is going to sound amazing.
I'm really confused.
Well, then I think that's no better place to end, because confusion is the word. Like, none of us can really understand why it's going on, because it's a humanitarian disaster.
Yeah, I mean, just to take it back for a second, I think generally we're in support of us taking in as many people as we can, helping as many people as we can, but sadly I don't see that happening with this government.
Just to give some more facts and figures at you quickly before we go, 31st of August is the cut-off date to get all US troops out. They reckon it takes them 36 hours from start to finish to pack everything up and get everyone out.
Okay.
And the Taliban have warned that there will be, quote-unquote, consequences if they stay beyond the 31st deadline.
So basically
consequences have not been determined. There has already been firefighting. Germans and Afghans engaged with an unknown enemy. One Afghan officer was shot and killed. 3 more injured. That's just to give you some kind of more facts and figures to make it sound like I'm pretty well read and pretty well understood.
Well, I think it's safe to say we failed at coming across as intelligent, well read and well put together men on this podcast.
Certainly
but we give it a go, and I think ultimately, as we all know, it's the trying that counts. And
what I tell my wife.
But guys, as always, thank you for listening. One thing I think we'd like to ask you to do is we've got episode number 69 coming at you soon.
69.
So what we would love is some funny sexual related stories that any of you may have, or that you may have heard about someone you know, or anything like that. Me and Jake will come along with some of our own funny stories and funny experiences. And yeah, we just want it to be a fun.
For anyone watching on YouTube, by the way, I wasn't having a stroke. I was doing like a Bill and Ted thing. I wasn't just spazzing out.
I wasn't even looking at you. I was looking at our audience down the camera. So I was completely ignoring you.
Yeah, listen. Also, not just extras. We've got this new sample that we'll learn how to work. I promise you. We absolutely won't. But I promise you, this is for you guys. Oh, what I thought it was.
What did you think it was? I didn't know what you were going for.
Of course.
So with this one, what does this button do?
We'll learn
and guys,
we'll learn it.
On that note,
no, wait, we will learn it. But look, if there's any sound, we can add it. We can personalise it. So if there's any sound bites that you think we should add, email us at crossingswords19@gmail.com.
Yep.
Hit us up at Swords Crossing on Twitter, crossingswords_podcast on Instagram, Crossing Swords on Facebook. You can just search it and find it. Let us know what we should be adding. Let us know what we should be talking about. We're always looking for episode ideas from you guys. So please, please, please keep them coming. And as he said, sex stories. There's going to be a lot, I imagine. I had a friend. Yeah, that's fine. That's cool. Fine. We don't judge.
If you don't want to tell us it was you, just tell us it was your mate Terry from down the road. Like it really doesn't matter. Yeah,
no, we're not gonna listen. Will we kink shame?
No, I don't think we will. We're quite open, guys. We're fine with people when they're sexually harassing dolphins. So I think we're all right.
Yeah, and then, we've already, stag do's are stag do's. We already know that. Anyone from a long time listener knows that.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, it's genuinely, we're going to be bringing some pretty embarrassing stories from ourselves.
Yeah.
But we want to hear yours. We've already got at least one coming from another listener, and we just want to hear more. And you know what? We just want to sit there and read through them.
And also, it gets you guys involved. It makes you feel like more a part of the podcast and the process. So yeah, if there's any subjects, anything whatsoever you'd like us to touch on, we're pretty much open to doing anything. Sexually and on the pod. So
yeah, I mean, it's just such a shame OnlyFans is taking porn off their website. Otherwise, we'd have just been. I mean, we just missed out.
It's disgusting, really.
We just missed out. I mean, we were talking about it.
I've just been priming myself to eat food online for people to watch. That was what I was going to go for.
I mean, how long? Was it like last week when we said we'll get back and do the pod, and we're like, while we're there, we'll start an OnlyFans. Yeah. That's what the
Jake
people
was just going to sit and feed me on camera. That was the idea. But now that they're getting rid of sexually explicit content,
God, we were so close. So close.
So yes, we are sorry that that's fallen apart. But yeah, guys, thank you.
Seriously, thank you for listening. We appreciate it so much.
Bye.